morning, everybody. I'm showing 10:02. We're going to get started, and we have 4 bills to hear this morning. They were we heard public testimony yesterday, and so we weren't planning to take any more today, and because the subcommittee recommended these to the full committee. I want to start this morning just by mentioning our colleague Tish Nagisi, who passed away suddenly, and we just want to remember her and honor her. And I know a lot of our colleagues who were close with her are grieving today, and her family. So just want to start with a moment of silence, and then Rep. Anderson is going to open us in prayer. So join me in a moment of silence, and just start whenever you're ready.
Dear kind and Heavenly Father, God, we bow before you today, Lord, to do and conduct the business of the people we represent, God. But we do it with a heavy heart today, God, because one of our own, one of your chosen to lead your people has passed on, God, and is in your presence this morning, God. We ask your condolences, your counsel, and your comfort on those that were close. And God, we ask your guidance. And we ask your wisdom and your discernment for every decision we make, and let us do this in her honor. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Rep. Anderson. All right. Senator Albers, you want to start us off with Senate Bill 3?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to present this bill to you and your committee. This is a very simple bill, which is called Reducing Barriers to State Employment. And it really gives us a focus in the state level to review all the job openings we have to make sure we didn't put an unnecessary need for a degree, a certification, or years for experience. And I always use the example that if Bill Gates would want to take some jobs in technology that we have in the state of Georgia, he would not be qualified for most because he didn't finish college. But I could argue he's probably one of the greatest technology minds ever to walk God's green earth. And I think we've learned over time that we're investing more in our technical college system. We're investing more in people getting on-the-job training and internships. And again, we just want to make sure that they match the need and we're not losing the best and brightest. And I'll yield for any questions.
All right. Well, thank you. And I think it's a great bill.
Thanks,
and looks like we have a question over here. Representative Bernal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I agree with you that there are some people who do have skills and talents, but I don't want us to go so far that we don't also appreciate those that do have degrees.
And I completely agree. Thank you for bringing that up, Representative. And this is what the Department of Administrative Services does, right? And it's good that we go through those and we analyze what are there. We always want to encourage education. And we also sometimes will hire people and they will continue their education while they're working for the state, and that helps with a career path and hopefully a good long time serving us here. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions? Okay. Representative Lallier.
Chairman, I don't want to assume and appreciate you bringing this to us this morning. What serves as that greatest barrier to entry currently for these roles? Is it a 4-year bachelor's degree?
I think it's a combination, and thank you for your question, of whether it be a degree or even sometimes time and experience. I was using Bill Gates as an example. I'll use another one. Sometimes because we have the boilerplate job posting, we might say, well, gosh, you need to have 5 years experience in this technology. Well, the technology may have came out a year ago, but nobody has that experience. And then people who looked said, well, I don't have the experience, so I'm not even going to apply, right? So we want to make sure that we are doing those updates and having that opportunity. It's not to diminish necessarily, but it's to give great opportunity, because a lot of folks will go on there and say, well, if I don't meet the qualifications, I just can't apply, and hopefully this will help.
So just to be clear, combination of credential and years of experience.
Exactly, yes.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, looks like that's all the questions. We have a motion? Have a motion, one and a second. Any discussion? Don't hear any. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, the measure passes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members, and I'm going to bring a rules form to get your signature if I could.
Yeah,
Thank
come on
you.
up, thanks. All right, if Senator Watson wants to come on up to present Senate Bill 116. All right, Senator Watson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. Senate Bill 116, simply put, allows cities to go from contracting for 5 years with a renewal to 20 years. And this allows basically like a leaseholder improvement on a facility and for them to be able to get their return on investment. And it's a commitment for, in this particular situation, relating to recreational facilities and arenas owned by the city themselves. That's basically it. I explained yesterday that we have two facilities, Grayson Stadium, built in 1915 or thereabouts, and a new arena in Savannah, and both places are doing well with the Savannah Bananas and Ghost Pirates and their marketing firm, and they spoke yesterday how they want to invest in those facilities, and the city would like this. There's been no opposition from any place that I've looked, and I've been looking.
Very good. Do we have any questions from the committee? Representative Bernal?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Does this also apply to counties?
No.
Okay, thank you.
If there's no other questions, I'll entertain a motion. Got a motion. We have a second. Second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. It carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Moving right along. Senator Dugan. Senate Bill 136.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm going to start with an apology for a comment that I made yesterday. When I said I told y'all that the definition was in another piece of the code. When I went through it last night to be able to come in today and say it's here in the code, I couldn't find it. I have the language. So now the thing that I was telling you yesterday was just two separate and distinct things. Today I'm going to ask you for it to be three. I want it to codify the workforce housing. I have a definition that we want to put in the bill that says what workforce housing is, and then the municipality piece that was in there before. So with that being said, the definition I would like to include, and I know our council back there has a spot for it to go, is what we talked about yesterday, is a range between 60% and 120% of the median income of that area. So that gives you the flexibility, because you know the median income in downtown Atlanta is going to be different than the median income in Bowden, Georgia. So, Mr. Council.
So I guess at the appropriate time after a motion, is that when we talk about the amendment to add that definition?
Okay.
Okay. All right. Looks like we have a couple of questions. Number 9, is that Representative Oliver? All right, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My ears pricked up yesterday because this issue about how you define it is a little bit differently used. And are we going to use a code of federal code regulation definition? I just want to make sure if we're pulling a definition together, we're not leaving anybody out.
It's pretty inclusive. It's the gap above, or it's the sweet spot above those that are eligible for low-income housing, and then you have those that we talked about, that the teachers, the police, the firemen that are in that sweet spot where they make too much money to get the. But I'm not answering your question.
The negotiations about some of the deals about low-income housing have different numbers in them, and they want to, some negotiations want to lower the amount, some of them want to increase it, and I just want to see if there's a federal definition that is the broad one that wouldn't exclude anything, and that's what my question is.
I have not seen one that is more inclusive than between 60% and 120%. I mean, that's a pretty broad swath there. So do you have something in mind?
I know that there are other negotiations that lower the amount from 60%, but I just want to know what the code of federal, if there is a federal definition in the CFR, I'd like to know what it is.
Have not seen one in the CFR.
Okay.
All right. Do we know, does anybody here know what the definition of low income, or is that the right definition we'd be looking for to compare? But I don't necessarily expect an answer, just thinking out loud. But we have Representative Anelowitz.
Thank you. I was actually wondering, because I think it's really important and great that we're including a definition. I very much appreciate that we're having this conversation. One thing I was wondering actually is, instead of 120%, could it be 150%? I know, for example, like in Athens Clark, to buy a home, the average home, you need to have basically like 179% of the median income. So is there any opposition to making it from 60 to 150?
Actually, with how they were basing it is, that 60 to 120 is based off housing in the area and or one of the factors into it,
Okay.
and what banks the percentages are willing to loan.
Okay.
So it's a multi-pronged facet, and that comes from the HUD site that loosely is based off the Housing and Community Development Act of 1974.
Okay. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Representative Maynor.
Thank you, Chair. Just was texting someone to see what the federal definition, if any, is of low income. I do know with the Justice 40 federal money that was going around, they made some definitions to make sure that money went appropriately. So I'm waiting for the answer from someone that would know that.
Thank you. Who's number 11? Representative Leverett. Chairman Leverett, excuse me.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for the benefit of the good of the order, I'll mention there is a definition. I don't know that it's in code. I looked for one yesterday, and I tried to do a search, and I could never find workforce housing. But there is a definition of the Urban Land Institute, which says it's housing affordable to households earning between 60 and 100% of area median income, which is apparently AMI. That's I guess a anagram for that. So I think that's consistent with what you were saying. It targets middle income workers, which includes professions such as police, firefighter, teachers, healthcare workers, retail clerks, and the like. Households who need workforce housing may not always qualify for housing subsidized by the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Program or the Housing Choice Vouchers Program, formerly known as Section 8, which are two major programs in place for addressing affordable housing needs. So to your point, I think there is at least a sort of a definition that seems to be somewhat accepted within academia or the industry standard, you would say, even though I don't know that it is strictly defined in code.
But if we put it in there today, it will be.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right. I'd like to ask our council, where would we could insert the proposed definition?
So what I would suggest is the amendment be to add a whole new section to Senate Bill 136, which would amend Code Section 3617.2, which is definitions. And then we would just add a new paragraph 21 to Code Section 3671.2 with the definition, however the committee decides to proceed at that point.
So a new section 2.
Yes, sir. Well, I mean, it would actually be a new section 1 when I get back to rewrite. Yeah, just
Gotcha.
a new section to the bill, amending Code Section 3671.2.
Representative Leverett, is that you again?
No, sir.
Oh, I'm sorry, Representative Oliver.
I don't think we have a motion yet, but if there is a motion made at the appropriate time, your suggestion of 60 to 120% is fine with me. And sometime in the future we'll figure out if there is any kind of federal definition, but I think you are being inclusive, and I think an amendment is necessary. So, Mr. Chairman, whenever it's appropriate, perhaps I'll start with if you wish,
Okay.
a motion to do pass, then we can offer the amendment.
All right, thank you for that. Looks, okay, that question looks like it was cleared, so at the proper time, I'll accept a motion.
Move to pass. Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Discussion. Representative Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to propose an amendment, as stated previously by council, to add an additional section to House Bill 136 that would address the definition of workforce housing. It would we would address Code Section 36-71-2, paragraph 21. It would become to define workforce housing as housing valued, I believe, at between 60% and 120% of the average medium income of that area, and to be worded appropriately per council.
Mr. Morelli?
Just to clarify, I think there was a slight difference between what Representative Anderson proposed and what Representative Leverett read. The definition from the federal regulations Representative Leverett read were regarding housing affordable to households earning, and I think that might be more comparable to the goal than a house valued at that amount.
I understand, and I will amend my motion to reflect what council said.
So then the definition, the new paragraph 21, we'd be adding to Code Section 3671-2 would be workforce housing means housing affordable to households earning between 60 and 120% of median income of the area.
I hate screwing up my own bill, but I think it's got to be AMI, the area median income, because that's an understood term.
Any discussion on using AMI?
Yeah,
Area median income.
AMI is an abbreviation of area median
Right.
income. So it's the same thing. It's just. Yes.
Representative Roberts.
On the HUD website, the definition for who's eligible for public housing is income limits. Let's see, HUD sets the lower income limits at 80% and very low income limits at 50% of the median income for the county or metropolitan area in which you choose to live.
So there's overlap between.
There's a little overlap, right? Which would help to ensure nobody's left out.
Yeah, that's good.
All right, so, council, can I ask you to state the amendment again, please, for the good of the committee?
Yeah, so the amendment would be to add a new section to Senate Bill 136, amending Code Section 3671-2 by adding a new paragraph to provide a definition, and that would be workforce housing means housing affordable to households earning between 60 and 120% of area medium income.
All right. Do I have a motion to accept the amendment? All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of the amendment? Aye. Any opposed? All right, the amendment carries. So now back to the bill in its entirety. Do I have a motion? We already have a motion, excuse me. All in favor of the bill with the Anderson amendment? Say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, it carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee, for helping me draft my bill. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Senator Still, if you want to make your way up to present Senate Bill 145.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee, good to see most of you all again. Hopefully we can go through this pretty quickly. So just a quick recap from what we discussed. So Senate Bill 145 is the Landscape Equipment and Agricultural Fairness, LEAF, LEAF Act. This has been surrounded with a little bit of controversy, most of it surrounding noise levels. We heard yesterday in testimony some questions about weights and performance, but I'd like to just reiterate for a moment some of the data points from our very own CDC. These are just a couple of comparisons. So leaf blowers of the electric variety are in the 40 to 60 decibel range. The new gas blowers that we're trying to protect with this bill, the new ones being produced are in the 60 to 65 range. But for contrast, washing machines are 50 to 70. Older model leaf blowers were 70 to 75, but the new ones are in the 60s. Motorcycles, 95. Georgia Bulldogs national championship game was about 110. Not that you have a football stadium parked outside of your house, but that's just for contrast in what we're looking at. But the major point of this is performance. Electric blowers average 18 minutes, gas blowers an hour plus. Volume and speed at which they can get the job done. So a gas blower will be able to do the job in a fraction of the time of an electric blower, and this is simply a preemptive bill to ensure that we're allowing time for technology to catch up and that we can try to eventually phase out two-cycle engines until science and manufacturing gets us there. So what this bill does not do, it does not prevent campuses such as schools, hospitals, and corporate centers from banning gas blowers because those are private. It does not prevent HOA neighborhoods from banning gas-powered units, and it does not address noise or decibel ratings. All it does do is it prevents entire cities and counties from banning gas-powered units because the technology between the two systems are not equal. GMA and ACCG are neutral on this. It has received widespread support from hundreds of landscape and outdoor management companies. It's received favorable support from the Georgia Chamber of Commerce and the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, who spoke yesterday on this matter. And with that, I ask your favorable support of SB 145.
Thank you. I see no questions. Now I do. Chairman Collins. Oh, I'm sorry. No, I was looking.
I just want to, when we're at the discussion part, I want to.
Okay, all right. 24. Representative Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, good morning.
Good morning, sir.
I wasn't in the subcommittee that heard this, but this question may have come up. Was there confirmation by the group that we're not stopping anyone from putting time limits on when these things can be used? That's the way I read it, but I want to confirm that discussion was had.
Yes, sir. So on the Senate floor, a friendly amendment was added to sunset this in 8.5 years, but it was the decision of this subcommittee recommendation yesterday. Was
I apologize. When I say time limit, I mean you can't crank this thing up at 3 in the morning. My neighbor can't.
Local noise ordinances dictate that.
I'm sorry.
Local noise ordinances dictate that. So they'd be violating local noise ordinance if they were to crank this up at some unusual hour.
Well, and that's my question. There's nothing in this bill that would prevent a ban on leaf blowers from, let's say, midnight to 6 a.m.
Well, local ordinance dictates that you can't do that. So, I mean, I think that's handled by any local city or county. I mean, there's a general acceptance in virtually every metro area around the state that outside noise pollution type work only occurs between an AM to a PM range, whether it's 7 or 8. Maybe it's different on weekends. Maybe it's no work on Sundays. But it varies by community. It can vary by HOA. It can vary by city or county with that ordinance.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Thomas.
I just want to clear, to me, that the crux of this bill is basically an electric leaf blower should be treated the same as a gasoline leaf blower, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. At the appropriate time, I'll motion to pass.
I think we have one more question before we get to the motion. Representative Leverett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think Representative Thomas kind of addressed the issue, but just to avoid all doubt, as I read this bill, you're not prohibiting restrictions upon leaf blowers. You're not prohibiting prohibitions of leaf blowers. You're just mandating that whatever applies to the gasoline-powered variety also apply to the electric variety.
That they be treated the same. Yes, sir.
If you want to impose a tax or a fee or a restriction or a prohibition, you just treat them the same. You can't differentiate in your ordinances.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Thank you.
All right. I'll entertain a motion if anybody has one. We have a motion. We have a second. Any discussion? All right. Representative Anuitz.
Thank you. And I think I've reached out to a lot of my colleagues who were not on the subcommittee yesterday, but this bill is a word-for-word regurgitation of SB 139 from 2015, which was the bill that would be the local it was a local preemption bill for auxiliary containers, which is defined as plastic bags. This is the same thing. Now that bill failed on the House on the House floor, and the reason why was overwhelmingly because it was a really, if we're going to erode local control, why are we doing it with banal things like plastic bags or leaf blowers? There's no hesitance in this body to go big. And I just feel like this is, again, I'm not going to be able to support this because it is a local preemption. No city in Georgia has proposed any such ordinance. No ordinances have been drafted, no ordinance have been introduced, no ordinances have been proposed. So I don't know what problem this is trying to solve. I can't figure out why this is such a critical issue and why it is an issue that we need to be focusing on right now, because again, no city in Georgia, no county in Georgia is actually trying to do this.
Thank you. Chairman Powell.
Thank you. I want to my dear friend, I hear what she's saying, but first I want to thank the GMA and ACCG, because they have basically taken hands off of this. A lot of times that we do preemptions up here as to prevent controversy in the future with local governments. And if you look down on line 33, 32 and 33, that this exempts counties and municipalities, that any ordinance that they might pass that they may have done would exempt them anyway, because the counties and the cities, they're running a commercial operation, so they certainly don't want to be have to incur the cost of this to their own operations. And if they don't do it for themselves, they certainly don't want to do it for the rest of the citizenry out there. I thought about this yesterday, and you got a lot of situations that these blowers, it's not just for the yards, that people want to keep the yards clean and all of this, but it's also things like golf courses. Now, golf courses, they use these, and we're not talking about a yard, we're talking about a major operation. So that's the reason this is done. And the cities, quite frankly, they don't want to have to deal with this. I mean, I hate to say that we got cities and counties that don't want to be laid siege to, but as we heard the testimony yesterday, you had some pretty passionate folks who they were irritating to the point they would buy decibel meters and stuff like that. And it's just, some people it's irritable to them. Now, as it was said earlier, cities and counties, if they want to pass a noise ordinance with certain restrictions at times, it's a public safety measure that they don't allow somebody to be out with a blower at 3 o'clock in the morning because they might get shot, quite frankly. But I think this is a good preemption to move forward with, and the difference between this and plastic bags, plastic bags was just something everybody used. Nobody wants to carry, no matter how good or how green somebody is. I don't always carry a reusable bag in my car or my truck or whatever. Plastic bags was just a way of doing business. Quite honestly, I wish it'd go back to paper, because I had more use for paper than I do these plastic bags. So that's my rationale, courteous rationale.
Thank you, Chairman Powell. Let's see, I recognize Chairman Oliver for a question or discussion.
This is a preemption bill that the counties and the cities are neutral on, in my guess, because it's non-issue. There's nobody's doing this. It's just a way to say it's some kind of message to the landscaping industry that we're for you when there's no issue. you're abandoning the market forces, you're abandoning local control, you're taking rights away from people, all of which is interesting in terms of an industry bill. For the benefit of my colleagues who weren't here yesterday, the real discussion was on whether or not to sunset this bill. And we got into a little bit of a confusion, which I created, some of it I'm sure, that to recognize that the Senate had imposed a sunset after 8 years. I wanted to reduce the sunset to 4 years, and Chairman Powell wanted to just do away with the sunset. I want to go back to discussing the sunset, because it seems to me that perhaps it's appropriate to reinstitute what the Senate did as an 8-year sunset. The market forces are going to resolve this non-issue anyway, and putting a sunset in it, I think, will kind of accelerate that market analysis. So at the appropriate time, Mr. Chair, I'd like to move an additional amendment to reinstitute the sunset of this bill for, I believe it was June 30th, 2031. Am I correct about that?
You know, the subcommittee took the sunset out yesterday, and so we're not going to entertain a motion for that right now.
Okay.
Representative Thomas.
So I've enjoyed this back and forth over the last couple days discussing this. Well, I have the microphone right now. So a couple of things I find to be interesting is we're talking about preemption, okay? And we use that word a lot, preemption. I don't know if I necessarily understand how we're making sure that two separate fuel-sourced leaf blowers are treated equally is somehow a preemption, because we're not telling them that they cannot use certain hours. If they want to set dB levels, okay, if any municipality wants to say you can't be above a certain decibel range, it just means that it has to be equal for both style leaf blowers. So to me, it seems like there's a whole lot of argument here about taking away local control, but really we're just making sure that every industry is treated on the same level playing field. And beyond that, I'd also like to say that, to me, when we start talking about free market economy, when battery-powered leaf blowers become cheap and efficient, then I would believe that the companies that use them would naturally tend to go that way because it makes economic sense for them. So again, that's just kind of my two thoughts on this.
And I agree with you, Representative Thomas. This is a matter where the industry needs stability, and they need to know that they're not going to be prevented from doing the job that they're hired to do. All right. Chairman Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I sat through this yesterday, and bringing up the bag man that was here a few years ago. The issue there actually reflects today, because part of their problem was across the street is another community, and they would have one set of rules, and right across the street is another set of rules. And that's what that particular issue was about, and why it wasn't able to go forward. I think this is something that will match everybody. I live in a rural community, but I live in town, and my yard is large, and the cord's not long enough. So I think that this is private and public use. So I do see where this is something that's needed. It's stopping it from treating one industry different than another, or one provider differently than another. So thank you for bringing the bill.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Taylor. We'll take one more question, then we'll entertain a motion. Representative Lallier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator, for bringing this bill to us. I can't speak to the economics, and I understand the technology kind of phases of adoption and costs, prohibition, et cetera, et cetera. I think ultimately where I land, those are decisions that need to be left to local decision makers. And I keep hearing that both gas and electric need to be treated the same. They're not the same product. I mean, they do the same thing, but they're not the same product. The impact is different. And so local municipalities should have the discretion. It's a non-starter today, but they should have a say for whatever reason to decide if they wanted to regulate the use of one versus the other, because they're both not the same product. They're not. And so I understand and share some of the concerns around adoption. It would be expensive, and training on use of gas versus electric versus gas. Again, that's not a decision for me to make here in this room. That's a decision that should be left to the decision makers on the ground, whatever their reasoning may be. And so I just wanted to get that out on the record. I understand the intent behind the bill. I cannot support the bill because I don't want to hamstring local officials from making decisions that affect them, their families, and their communities.
All right, Representative Anderson.
I just have one quick question for the author on this. Is there anything in this bill that would prevent a local government from providing an incentive-based program to encourage the use of one particular technology over the other, while not imposing a penalty on those who do not participate in that program?
The bill doesn't address that, but it would certainly be encouraged. And I think that our friends at GMA and ACCG would, love to be able to talk to a municipality about doing that if they were so inclined. I think that the crux of this is that Georgia is not a state that generally is looked at on a nationwide basis as directing incentives on technology development. And so a lot of that comes from our friends to the very far west of us, and that sort of trickles down. So as manufacturing decisions are made, I don't think that they would be made locally, but if a municipality wanted to offer incentives to help encourage that, I'm sure they would.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to call a question.
All right, we have a motion. We have a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
I'm not allowed to offer my amendment at this point in relation to reinstating the sunset.
No, ma'am, I'm not going to recognize that. All right, so we have the ayes. All opposed?
No.
All right, we'll do a visual vote in favor. All right, all opposed? All right, the bill carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, and we will post the agenda for next week's subcommittee meeting on Tuesday before the week's over, and we're adjourned. Thank you.